Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the DFS Army Fantasy Football Show. It's been 1 month, but we had to get the man back on the show. You guys know him as Uncle Says. I know him as Season Long Says. The world knows him as Alan Seslowsky of Rotowire. Al, it's crunch time. We had to bring in the big guns. Welcome back to the program.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. That slacker, Brandon Adam, man, says, hey, let's do a podcast together. You, me, and Shane. I get excited, and then he no-shows. That slacker. That's all right. We'll shame him publicly. It's no big deal.
Well, I mean, you literally just shamed him publicly. This is a public program. This isn't just us in the basement shaming Brandon D. Adam on Twitter. But yeah, man. So of course, you can find all of Alan's content over at rotowire.com. You can follow him on Twitter at Alan Seslowsky. You could hear him on the SiriusXM airwaves pretty much nonstop. Like you did double duty the other day. You're going hard right now, but you know, 'tis the season, I suppose.
Yeah, 9 a.m. every Sunday in season on Channel 87. Hey, by the way, how many drafts do you have left to do as we head into Labor Day weekend here?
I'm done, man. That's it. The drafts are behind me. I'm ready for the season. And that's kind of what we want to talk about here. So the first football game is this Thursday. Of course, it's the defending champs, the Rams, going against the Buffalo Bills, who a lot of, quote, experts, including Vegas, have the Bills as a favorite to win it all next year. But we wanted to provide some last-minute fantasy football advice for drafters, if you're still drafting, or for those of you like myself who have finished all the drafts and you're looking forward to the season. Because, Al, I mean, here's the thing. Every single year, this fantasy football game continues to grow. And I mean, you and I we're in the weeds, man. Like we're just degenerates, and we know things that seem pretty obvious might not be obvious to the average player nowadays. So we're going to do a bit of a program here where we're going to go through some of the last minute tips of the trade from one very experienced man. I mean, you're effectively like a degenerate at this point, right, Al? Like you own it.
First of all, I take exception with you saying that you with your elitist attitude that you're so in the weed, Shane. You know so much more than the average player. In fact, I will say that the average player knows more than the average player did 10 years ago. You could just walk into a draft now, never have studied because of best ball that starts now in February, meaning paid drafts, people actually putting money in and drafting teams from February until now. Till Labor Day weekend, that the ADP is so tight right now that your average player that knows almost nothing about fantasy football can have a good draft. So the last minute fantasy football draft advice that we give today has to be a little bit like, how can we exploit those edges when everyone has the same information as us when we come to the draft table? I think that's really the puzzle that we need to put together today.
Well, I think it was on one of your shows recently, Al. Like you said something very accurate. It's a sense that, and we talk about it in this program, it's about your roster construction. But I believe you specifically said it's about how you attack the quarterback position and the tight end position. Like really, when you decide to draft those types of positions is going to define your entire team. So let's get at it. I mean, let's talk about specifically draft strategy here. So you're walking into the draft. There's lots of strategies out there. There's the zero RB zealots. And look, past few years, it's actually been a successful strategy because all the elite players have been getting hurt. There's the robust RB strategy, which is just hammer RBs early because of the position scarcity. And then there's more of a bit of a hybrid model. Some people call it the hero RB strategy. Some people call it the anchor RB strategy. Generally speaking, Al, because you've done a number of drafts this year, what approach, more often than not, have you taken when drafting that somebody going into the draft this weekend can implement?
Yeah, one of the most common questions that we often get is, how should I start my draft, right? I'm sure you get that too. Should I start wide receiver, RB, one of each? And, that's obviously an impossible question to answer because if you're picking, let's illustrate an example. If you're picking at the third pick overall, if Jonathan Taylor falls to you, and that actually happened to me the other day in a draft, it doesn't happen often, then you're going to start with a running back, right? If Taylor and your second favorite running back, let's say a lot of people like Christian McCaffrey as their one or their two, then it probably is a very sound strategy to start with wide receiver. Now, if you're just talking about as general strategy, I think it's really it's comfortable. Let's call it's comfortable to come out of your draft first two rounds with one of each that you feel good about, not forcing the position, because then you could choose your own adventure, right? You could choose which way you want to go. Whereas if you start wide receiver, you're going to be hunting for running back and possibly passing on a value. So to answer your question directly, try to get one of each, but be prepared and have a plan. That's the thing. Have a plan if it goes the opposite way you thought. So if you thought, okay, I'm picking at the end of my draft, I'm going to go wide receiver, and the best player on your board Saquon Barkley, and then it comes back around and say it's DeAndre Swift. You need you need a plan for wide receiver. So have it mapped out ahead of time for the first 3 or 4 rounds, and then obviously you have to take what the board gives you.
So basically, you're kind of saying it's like, okay, it's like in the NFL where a coach might have 15 scripted plays to start, and then they adjust based on what the defense is giving them. It's kind of the same idea here. And you and I were
a good analogy. Good analogy right there.
Yeah. I mean, you and I were on Twitter just this morning and yesterday, and somebody was asking, okay, I'm at the turn. What do you guys suggest? Do I go RB? And I mean, very simply, you said I like to get one of both. And why not? Because that does create flexibility. Now, if you are like us and have literally been doing drafts since February,
by the way, I just want to circle back to that tweet because that's an important point there. I did. You said RB. I said at least one running back.
Right.
So I'm okay doing 2 running backs there, but I wouldn't want to go wide receiver in a 10-team league on the 10 spot. That was what I said. So if you're in a 10-team league and you have the 10th pick, I would say at least one running back is the right way to go.
So then I got to follow up with that. Why? Why are you making that?
Because in a 10-team, so we all know that wide receiver depth in round 3 through 6 is incredible. When you talk about wide receivers of confidence, and in a 10-team league, it's even more incredible, right? So the running back depth is what drives it. And when I say running back depth, I don't mean like, getting Rashad Penny at a great value later on. I'm talking about the top 12 running backs will be off the board by the time you pick again in the 3rd round, possibly, depending on where you have James Conner. So because the wide receiver depth in a 10-team league is even better than it is in a 12-team league, I would want to go for the more scarce positions there, and which, by the way, makes a great case for going early. Your original point was, how do you play tight end? There is a case for going tight end early in a 10-team league because the running back depth is greater also.
Yeah, and I think that's a really sharp point. I mean, the whole idea with taking a tight end early, and typically I don't do that in larger leagues, but when you're in a 10-person league, a lot of the times, I mean, you look at the waiver wire and you can get a startable wide receiver. Running backs are sometimes tougher, but you can get one of those starting running back or wide receivers later, and you can rock that waiver wire. But when you have one of those elite tight end positions, it really does help differentiate you in those onesie positions because the player pool at the end of drafts is just so much stronger at those other positions.
Here you go, Shane. Ready? I'm going to illustrate your example. You just made I think the best takeaway point we have here. This is the waiver wire. I just did a 10-team league, which I don't like doing, by the way. And if this league remains 10, I'm not doing it next year. Here's the wide receivers that are on waivers after a 10-team league. Pretty deep league is complete. Jacoby Myers, DJ Shark, MVS, Russell Gage, Kenny Galladay. These are all players that I would not only want to roster in a 12, I might start them in a 12.
Yeah. Well, and you know what? That's maybe the best piece of advice. It might be too late for this season, but for these 10-team leagues, go out and get extra starting positions. I mean, personally, if you're not playing at Superflex in a 10-person league, I don't know what you're doing. Like
I would even argue 2 QB in a 10-person, not even Superflex. I would say, hey, mandatory. I mean, your point is the real one is like, hey, more quarterbacks starting.
Yeah.
But yeah.
And this is going to make the league more fun. I mean, the bottom line is, to your point, Al, like ADPs are so sharp. It's pretty much roll the dice. You walk in, you auto draft your players. And then honestly, there's a lot of luck that gets involved. Who gets the injuries versus the deeper your bench, the deeper your starting players, the more the skill aspect actually comes into play. So I think that's really sharp. I mean, just in general, it's important to have fun with the league, right? But let's get into some of these questions, Al.
Yep.
Okay. So we've been doing this for a while, and we've been following all the beat reporters. We've been following our friends at Roster Watch who are doing their tours. We're following some of your colleagues at SiriusXM
RotoWire.
who are doing the
Oh,
camp
yeah.
tours, and
Yep.
RotoWire, of course.
Yep.
And we have all this information, okay? But we probably have at this stage of the game all the information we're going to glean from the offseason. So are there any player takeaways at the start of the season that you had that kind of felt silly now or have come home to roost?
Yeah, I mean, the funny thing is, like, we want to victory lap or, say, oh, that was a bad take already. Meanwhile, we haven't even seen the answers for the test yet. Week 1,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
even week 1, those aren't the answers for the test. If Sammy Watkins has 6 for 60 and a touchdown week 1, are you really thinking that, oh my God, I should have drafted Sammy Watkins? You're like, no, this is what Sammy Watkins does week 1. So it's hard to say if we were right or wrong yet. The NFL is such a small sample size league in general that it's really by week 2 or 3, sometimes even 4, that we don't have the answer. So I guess really what we're looking for is the players that we liked. Did we actually draft them when we were on the clock? Battle test our rankings, right? So if you were here's a place where you could say that maybe you're right. Let's, Dameon Pierce is a hot player that gets talked about a lot. If you were drafting Dameon Pierce in his double-digit round ADP, and now you see he's going in the 6th, 5th, 4th round, sure, that was a good pick. You were right to say that, hey, this player could ascend. I've been very vocal about that. I think that Zeke Elliott is being drafted below his floor. Not that he's a like a league winning pick, but he's being drafted below his floor. Let's see what happens when the games start.
Yeah.
If you're drafting Javonte Williams in the top 15, top 20 picks because you think he is the next Jonathan Taylor, let's see what happens. Let's see if he has 70%. Like, we could say we think we know, but we don't know at this point until the big reveal. So I guess that really, I'm going to throw the question back to you. What do you think? What is the biggest reveal of week 1 that you're most looking forward to seeing?
You're asking me that question?
That's the question I'm asking.
Man, to be honest with you, it's a few of these. Well, Green Bay is a great example. It's where the quarterback is an elite quarterback, but the wide receiver core or even just the pass catchers around him are somewhat suspect. Okay, so it's what is the target share is going to look like in Green Bay? Is Allen Lazard, who's a top or receiver anyways, obviously the running backs are being drafted early, but is Allen Lazard actually going to be the one? Or maybe Sammy Watkins is a guy. You get that information. Sammy goes 6 for 60 and a touchdown. Is he going to be your hot waiver wire ad that week? How is the Kansas City wide receiver course going to break down? I would say you were kind of pro Juju Smith-Schuster, like not as necessarily one, but we liked his talent. I'm on board with that as well. I think Juju Smith-Schuster is a good wide receiver, but is it going to go to all Travis Kelce? Is MVS going to get a few little takes in there? Like, understanding how
those are the big reveals that you're looking for to see the distribution of targets in those high powered offenses.
It really is. And then of course there's your guys, right? Like for me, it's Elijah Moore. How's Elijah Moore going to look week 1 with Joe Flacco? Is Flacco going to target the hell out of him? Rashad Bateman. I mean, Elijah Moore, we saw it with Bateman. We haven't even really seen it in the NFL. And man, like, just even today, scrolling through Twitter, like somebody put out a tweet about Jalen Reagor, and they showed just how elite he was at TCU when he was in college. And the take was, well, the Eagles weren't using him properly. Now that he's in Minnesota, he's going to be played. Well, maybe he is what he is, right? Maybe he's not going to be elite. So there's just so many damn storylines that we've gone through but at the end of the day, you want to see how Zeke Elliott gets used. It's these players that we've been talking about and had strong takes on. Like, that's what we want to see as analysts, right?
Yeah, I don't think it's going to be shocking to me. I mean, Zeke Elliott's going to get 18 to 25 touches in week 1. And he's going to have 14 to 18 fantasy points. I mean, that's not, and people, that's not great. No, that's what he is at this point. He's 14, 15 locked in fantasy points. He's running back Keenan Allen. That's what he is. Yeah. He's a boring pick that's being drafted below his floor that, and for Zeke Elliott, it's that he just doesn't get hurt so far in his career. He's an Iron Man. So I'm not like worried about his like the reveals that I'm most looking forward to see. Like when the curtain goes up and the live bullets, proverbial bullets start flying, I want to see if Gabe Davis and Amon-Ra St. Brown are the players that we think they're going to be. Productive round 4 players. I want to see if Darnell Mooney gets 12 targets in week 1. These are the things that I'm actually looking forward to seeing. I don't know. The Zeke Elliott thing to me, even though I've been vocal about it, it's vanilla ice cream. I know what it's going to be. I know what to expect. When I take a vanilla ice cream cone and I put it to my mouth, I know what it's going to taste like. These other ones, these have like just pop potential, or they're going to be wrong. And there's going to be a lot of victory lapping. Dameon Pierce's workload in week 1. I want to see what that looks like.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, okay. So Al, what is your approach to setting your roster? Like, are you going to be setting, so say week 1, okay? We're in roster setting mode. Okay. You've drafted, it's a standard league. You got 3 wide receivers. How do you approach it when your, say, wide receiver 2 has one of the bottom matchups, like the 30th ranked matchup, but your wide receiver 5 has like this juicy top 3 matchup? Like, how do you approach setting your roster that initial week? Like, do you take into account that software matchup?
Yeah, no, not at all. I don't even look at it. I think it's, I know some people love to look at matchups. I do not. Because what we think the matchups are good, just put the best skilled players that are in the best position with their quarterback that are scheduled for targets or projected for targets week 1. Do that week 2. Then we get a little sample by the first month of the season, which teams are good, which teams are bad. Then you could start saying, oh, this team doesn't give up any points to the tight end. You're never going to bench an elite tight end, but maybe if you played the weight on tight end game and you have David Njoku and Austin Hooper, then you'll start playing the matchups. But week 1, just put your best guys in, unless there's an obvious, situation. I was suggesting, we were talking about Zeke a million times, and he has a quote bad matchup against the Tampa Bay run defense. I'm playing Zeke. I'm not playing, Devin Singletary over him if I have them, and so on and so forth. So I'm ignoring matchup in week 1 for sure.
Do you do like a team depth chart type thing? Like that's what I like to do. Like, you draft your, say, wide receivers, right? And you've got 5 or 6 wide receivers. Will you rank them just for your own bench, so that when push comes to shove and it's a close decision, that you'll say, okay, I'm going to choose this person because I believe it's a better talent, they're in a better situation? Or like, how do you approach that? Or is it pretty fluid on a week-to-week basis?
Well, things are going to change, right? I mean, look, last year, you drafted Cooper Kupp in the 5th round or 4th round. He was your wide receiver 2 or 3. It was pretty evident that you should move him up your fantasy football depth chart by week 2, right? You were like, week 1, oh, this is good. I got a good performance. Week 2, oh, again. We did a redrafting the players video last year after week 2. And I took Cooper Kupp in the 1st round. And obviously, people, whoa, Cooper Kupp in the 1st round, right? I could have been wrong, but I happened to be right. So, yeah, I would say I don't actually put that. What you just said is a really good exercise to do if you want to map it out. Unfortunately, the volume of leagues I'm in, that would be crazy to do. I'm in too many leagues at this point where it's bad for my health. But yes, I would say that I have in my mind, when I look at each team, I probably rank the players, based on how I drafted. And yeah, I'm going to put the best player that I believe can get me the most fantasy points. I mean, that's definitely what you should be doing. I like that you spelt it out though as a process.
Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, the advice Alice Seslowsky just gave is play the player that's going to give you the most fantasy points. That's just perfect advice. You can't go wrong with that advice.
Ranking the players, right? Is that's what you're trying to do? Which player's the best?
I'm just busting balls.
Yeah.
I think though, for the average fantasy football player, I mean, they might have 2 or 3 leagues, right? That they're in. In which case, then I mean, you're a sadist though, Al. What can I say? Okay, so this is Jeff saying, great point, Al. Ignore the matchups too, unless I know it's Jalen Ramsey or such. What about that one, right? Where it's going to be man coverage and it's going to be an elite corner against your elite wide receiver. Like, play it to me, right?
Yeah, I mean, if I have Devontae, again, I don't know who the Rams are playing. Who week 1? You said it's the
Bills,
Buffalo? Right?
Yeah,
I'm not benching Stephon Diggs. I'm just
Hell
not.
No. Hell
yeah.
No.
So Jeff's point is like, I get it, but I am still playing my elite players because that's bad for Jalen Ramsey. That's not bad for my guy. Of course, you want the lesser guy on him. So yeah, I'm not in week 1, week 2. I'm not paying attention to matchups. It's adding a layer of complexity. And if you do that and it works for you, sure. You asked my process. I'm not doing it.
No, fair enough. Fair enough. Let's pivot for a sec. I want to ask you a personal question, an Alan Seslowsky question. Okay. So you've been in the industry for a few years now. Is there anything that surprises you or has surprised you based on your initial expectations or impressions of what you thought it was going to be a professional analyst?
Yeah. Oh, okay. So we're going there. All right. No,
We're going there, baby.
I like the question. Yeah, I think like in any like business or industry or something you want to do that you're passionate about, there's so many people that say they want to do it, and then it's execution. So this is advice for any industry that you want to get into, but definitely for fantasy football, because at the beginning, no one's able to do it full time. You start with, you have like your normal job, and then you're doing fantasy on the side, and then you try to make it a career. I would say showing up when you don't want to, when it becomes a grind, because most people won't show up on day 7, right? They'll come on day 1, they'll come on day 2. And day 7 is just the proverbial for down the road, on week 7, month 7. So showing up and doing good work when you just don't feel like it eliminates like 95% of the competition. And you can be okay. You don't have to be great. You could just show up and do consistent, with a baseline of quality work. And that is true for any industry, but more specifically, I see it here. So many people say they want to do, but when the actual things come up and the time of the day isn't great for you, or the number, it interferes with this and this and this, that's the difference maker from my viewpoint in the short time I've been doing this.
Well, say they're passionate about fantasy sports and they want to get into it. Like, is there any suggestions you have for people to kind of get to the next level? Like, and I know the answer to this, but for the people, how did you differentiate yourself to the point where Roster Watch seeked you out? Obviously, Rotowire seeked you out. What did you do?
Yeah, if you want to get into any, first of all, you have to love it, right? I mean, we all love fantasy football. I mean, no question there. But when I say love it, I mean like really love it. Just consume so much content, good content that you just see what's out there, see what's popping, right? And then have, in my eyes, is learn skills to be able to do it all. Like I always liken producers and content creators in fantasy football to like a submarine. In a submarine, the guy who flips the eggs, who cooks the eggs, knows how to fire the missiles, right? I mean, you need to know how to do every single job. The more skills and jobs you can do to make the process easier. And when I say that, it's like, there's a lot of good content creators out there, great content creators, that's all they could do. And great. But if you could do that, if you can cut video, if you can learn all the back end stuff, how to upload podcasts and make graphic art and understand how to interact with people and book guests, and so the more skills you can accumulate, that I think that makes you more marketable in any job. And specifically, that's how I was able to get my foot in the door, which is produce a lot of free, passionate content that somebody, hopefully resonated with, and just look to get better every day, be proactive in wanting to get better, and ask and be curious, ask a lot of questions.
Yeah. I mean, I've said this to you before, but I think what really differentiates you versus a lot of the competition is just your video editing skills. Like, people love to consume content in different ways now. And actually you and Bob Harris had a very interesting conversation about this on your show just yesterday. Rotowire podcast. You can find it anywhere you consume podcasts. And that's what I think really differentiates you. But even, years ago, I remember you used to call into the Rotowire show on Sirius XM and with Chris Liss, and you would talk about, okay, these are my top 10 favorite moments from this last season of Rotowire. Like, little things like that really will differentiate you, because I still remember the first time you were on the show, and Chris, before he had you on, he's like, listen, I've never really spoken to Alan. We didn't really go through this. We don't know what to expect. So if this goes off the rails, just bear with us. And then, of course, you come on and you're a total freaking pro, man. Like, that's what's going to differentiate you. And Clip, listen. Okay. Hopefully it's not too much of a grind to listen to us every morning.
And here's the other thing. I'm going to say 2 more quick things I think are important in any industry, and specifically in content creation and fantasy football, is 1, don't waste anyone's time, right? Like, I always make the joke, like weather talk, right? Like, we don't care how the weather is. Oh, it's a nice day here today. Oh, what are you doing? Oh, I'm going this. Just don't bore us, get to the chorus, right? Get to the
There
parts that everyone likes to sing along with. Yeah, you could, if you have, once you've built credibility, I think that you can express your personality a little bit more. But I don't feel like I'm in that luxury bracket yet where I could have a whole conversation and then
Yeah.
let's get to it. Don't waste anyone's time. And then maybe at the end you tag something on. That's just my opinion. The other thing that I think is important, and actually I'm going to credit you, Shane, is you need encouragement from the right people at the right time. I will never forget when I was still working a normal traditional job. And actually, it was you that called me up and said, "Hey, man, you can do this." And I was like, you always hear, "Oh, yeah, you could." But no, you got through to me, and you said you gave me the courage to submit my application to, at the time, what was Jeff Ratcliffe's business called? Where was he at the time?
He was the PFF, I thought.
Right. So that was what it was. So I submitted an application, which you saw a job listing for, and you gave me the courage to do it. I submitted it. I don't even think the resume got looked at, but in that process, that's when Byron and Alex saw the resume. They said, "Hey, come work with us at Roster Watch. We like what you're doing." So yes, I think encouragement from the right people at the right time is the necessary water on the soil that you need to really sprout up.
Yeah, shoot. I mean, listen, Jeff, I ain't got very many. I got no follicles under here either. So it's between Jim, the geek, Alan, it could definitely be the Bald Calls fantasy football podcast on a regular basis. Let's get back to some fantasy football advice here, Al, because that's what the people really came for. This is really important. Okay, so more and more leagues are starting to adopt the FAB, free agent auction bidding is what it stands for. FAB dollars in their fantasy football leagues, okay, versus a traditional waiver wire approach. How do you, Alan Seslowsky, approach your FAB budget? Are you more of a spend early kind of guy, or do you like to do the slow drip as the season progresses?
Yeah, so I think that the key part of this is there $0 bidding allowed, or is there a minimum of $1 bid? So if there's a minimum of $1 bid, what I think you need to do is in $100, or take 10% of your budget and just carve it off for the end game, right? Because you need dollar players at the end of the season. So just realize that 90% of your budget is your spendable budget. If there's no $0 bidding, if there's $0 bidding around, you can spend like a drunken sailor, no problem, right? And I think that the early reveal running backs are the ones that show themselves, and I like to go heavy on those guys. Elijah Mitchell would be a great example from last year, but there's always one that pops in the first couple weeks. And if there's going to be a wide receiver that pops, it's going to be in the first couple weeks. It's very rare that the week 7 wide receiver. There'll always be a Khalil Herbert type that pops in week 6, the backup running back for the Bears, or week 10, whatever it was. But if there is a running back that shows themselves in week 1, I want to think about spending half of my budget right away, especially if I'm an RB depleted team. That can fail, and you have to be careful. So it's like Benny Snell that has 2 touchdowns in week 1. I'm not spending half of my budget on Benny Snell, right? We already know what he is. But when an unknown player, I'm just trying to think of like an example right here. Who would be okay, how about this? If Tyrion, I don't want to talk about the same team there. So who's a team, Shane, that has okay, all right, here we go. David Montgomery. Yeah. Is on the Bears. Everyone likes him as a starter. But what if Khalil Herbert has 12 to 14 touches in week 1 and he has 100 yards and a touchdown, and Montgomery has like 8 carries for like 60 yards? Now you got to start thinking about spending a quarter to 35 to 40% of your budget on a running back that could have a lion share. Those guys don't come often. Now there's a side of that says, hey, that's just going to be a 50-50 share. But you asked how I do it is if there's someone that reveals themselves early as probably a 7th round, like he would have been a 7th round pick, I want to spend money on that guy.
Yeah. And the thing is that the reason we do all this work at the start of the season is that if there's players that are kind of in the back of your head, like, so the guy that I initially thought of was Zamir White, who's on the Raiders backing up Josh Jacobs. So there's been a lot of discussions about Josh Jacobs and his usage this season. Some people say, well, Josh McDaniels doesn't want to use him. Other people are saying, well, it's his last year as a Raider, so you might as well run the wheels off, right? So there's 2 different approaches. But if Zamir White comes in and it's a 50-50 opportunity share, we like Zamir White's profile. We saw what he did in college in Georgia. And that's the player you want to attack. Now, Jeff, this is actually a similar approach. I like to save a little bit of money as well down weeks 13, 14, 15. And that's why it was so important that Al said, make sure you know your league rules. Are you allowed $0 bids? Are you allowed, does it have to be a $1 bid? Personally, I think leagues that don't allow $0 bids are stupid. I'm going to say it.
Yep.
It's stupid. It doesn't make any sense.
I agree with you. Can I answer, because it's a very good counterpoint. So for people listening on the audio podcast, we had a commenter on the live stream ask say that they like to save some money for the weeks 13 through the end. Now, first of all, you may not even be in it at week 13, right? So don't worry about saving, right? It's not like that would be my advice. Now, I know a lot of people like doing that strategy. I'm not going to tell them they're wrong, because sometimes when the Amon-Ra St. Brown or the Rashad Penny show themselves at the end, I don't have any money and I don't get them. And that could have cost me a league last year. So there is merit to that strategy, because I just don't know if I'm even going to be in it at that point. What if I'm out of the playoffs and I missed out on Elijah Mitchell? I'd rather know. I take the season in 3 steps. There's the first 4 weeks, the second 4 weeks, and then the home stretch. So I want to make sure I'm getting to the next step. That's why when you hear about these best ball players, they're correlating week 17 and this, that, like, I get it, but like, dude, you got to get there, man. You got to get there. So yes. And all the other thing is, try to see who could be the big pickup next week and get them for $0 in the current week. That's how you counter the not saving any money for the end. I think we put a bow on that.
Yeah, we definitely do. And let's go out. I mean, so one of our commenters, Jeff Keys, is talking about getting the auction style waiver. Honestly, it will change how you play fantasy football. It's that important of a rule change to get the fab dollars versus just whoever has priority. It's just it adds such a different dynamic to the game. And the other thing you need to think about spending your money early is that if you think about the ROI, your return on investment, the sooner you buy this player and the sooner they're scoring fantasy points for you for, say, 10, 11 weeks of the season versus just 1 or 2 weeks at the end of the season, that's going to be more valuable for your team. And I mean, listen, the truth in life is like anything. It's kind of a balanced approach. You can't go spend $100, 100% of your budget in week 1, because listen, 1 week, very small sample size. Are you really going to blow up your entire offseason analysis based off of 1 game? And now sometimes, Al, you talk about what is it? It's the value, or just the amount of it. Like it's that pitching reference you always use, right? Where
the magnitude of the sample, right? For example,
yes.
Let's say a rookie, it's not just the size of the sample, it's the magnitude. Let's say a rookie pitcher who's never pitched in baseball before comes in and has a perfect game in his first start. Okay, that's a sample of 1, but wait a second. He threw 27 strikeouts. Like that, that's not the same as would you, my colleague Chris Liss always says, would you rather have a player come in and have 200 strikeouts in the year, which is very good in baseball, or would you rather have a guy that has, 40 strikeouts in his first couple games, right? And the answer is, and then not know what else happens for the rest of the year. It's not always the size of the sample, it's the magnitude when it's above a certain threshold that actually matters. And if a player comes in that we weren't expecting and sitting on the waiver wire and has, 18 touches for 150 yards and 3 touchdowns, wait a second here. That could be worth your full budget.
Yeah, true that. Okay. We kind of talked about this a little bit earlier on the season, on the show, but I want to ask you, Al. So I call myself a fanalist, right? At the end of the day, we're still fans of the sport. Who are you, Alan Seslowsky, the man looking back at me right now? Who are you most excited about? Which player are you most excited about? Could it be maybe, just possibly one of your New York Jets players? Or who are a couple players you're just excited to see this year as a fan of the NFL?
Yeah, I mean, my homer team is the Jets, but this happened before I was doing fantasy content professionally. Like, as you become more and more engulfed in sports betting and in fantasy gaming, and especially in higher stakes leagues or, more leagues, you become less of a fan of your team and more a fan of players, right? And that's kind of how it is, and the guys who I've rostered. I mean, of course, I always want to see the Jets do well. That never happens. I live in North Florida, so it's always interesting. I have another bad team of the Jaguars, but if you're asking me who are the guys that I want to see do well, and you put me on Jalen Hurts pretty early, I'm going to be rooting for him. I like his backstory where he's always fighting, upstream. He's always climbing up a hill, and he always seems to come out on top. Even now, like we see it in our dynasty superflex leagues, where he doesn't get drafted in the top 10 picks of the first round because there's some doubt. And in the minute he signs that 3-year, $100+ million extension, then he'll go as a top 5 player. So I would say you putting me on Hurts makes me want to root for him. And specifically, I want to see what's going to happen with the second-year quarterback class. They can't all be bad, right? I mean, I know Mac Jones and David.
Yeah, you watch yourself, Mr. Mac Jones. He's
right.
Looks like he could be a decent middle range quarterback, which is kind of what you need in the NFL sometimes.
Yeah, I'm also rooting for Justin Fields. I always liked Justin Fields. I thought the Jets should have drafted Justin Fields with the 2nd overall pick last year. So, and I'm encouraged from him. And I'm rooting for Tua to be good, even though, it's like I'm not as I agree with the assessment on him that it hasn't looked good, but I'm rooting for him. So those are the guys I'm rooting for. Tua, I'm rooting for Justin Fields, and I'm rooting for Jalen Hurts to all be good in 2022.
What about Trevor Lawrence, man? Do you think he's a real deal?
So it's funny you say that because he was touted as an elite prospect, and the pushback that I conveyed on a lot of podcasts was I don't know if he has the ceiling like a Peyton Manning ceiling. He might, but I always thought that Trevor Lawrence, the reason why he was the 1-1 was the same reason you draft Jonathan Taylor in your fantasy league at the 1-1, not because you think he's going to be the number 1 overall player in fantasy, because he's kind of a lock to be a top 5 player, Jonathan Taylor. I thought Trevor Lawrence's floor was higher than most prospects coming out, and the ceiling obviously is to be determined. So I don't think he can fail. I think it his worst case scenario, he ends up being like a Derek Carr level quarterback for real football. I mean, their games are different, but that's the level. Like we'll think of him as like the 14th best quarterback in the league for at least most a part of a decade. And at his floor.
Yeah, how would you define this season as a successful season for him then?
I would say that he has to he's got to show flash plays, right? In every game and put them together consistently. I would say you have to see, like, you remember what with Patrick Mahomes, like even that week 17 before he was a starter, you saw some sidearm throws, you saw some escape, you saw him making some crazy reads. I would say we need to see those flashes in back-to-back games. The record doesn't matter for Jacksonville, right? I don't think, like, it's certain quarterbacks, they need to like get their team to the playoffs. Like Jared Goff needs to get his team as close to the playoffs as he can in order for that to be a successful season. The Jaguars can go 2 and whatever again. And if Trevor Lawrence is one of the top 12 passers or top 10 quarterbacks in the league, he needs to perform wow plays consistently for him to be. The record doesn't matter for Trevor Lawrence this year.
Yeah. And I think what's so frustrating too is we know that the Jags went out and they completely partially revamped their wide receiver room, but it's still, they got Christian Kirk. They got the aging veteran Marvin Jones. They got Zay Jones, who on any other team is like a wide receiver 5 as their wide receiver, probably 2. It's going to be him and Marvin Jones as a wide receiver 2. So I think that if he can show real chemistry with Christian Kirk, similar to what we saw with Jalen Hurts last year with Devonta Smith, where Smith probably isn't a real true 1 in the NFL. Christian Kirk probably isn't a real true 1. Now, the problem is that the Jags say want to go out and get one of those 1s next year. It's probably going to have to be in the draft because they've invested so much money in Christian Kirk already. It's going to be tough to pay 2 wide receivers at elite level money. But I agree with you. I think that the book isn't written yet on one Trevor Lawrence. Last year was probably the most dysfunctional, at least in my memory.
If he's bad again this year, the book still isn't written on him. Like when you're the number 1 overall pick, look how many chances Sam Darnold got before. Like this is the year this is year like 5, right? And we're like, oh, okay, it's over. Like when you're the number 1 pick, and Sam Darnold was like the 3 pick. But when you're actually the number 1 pick, it's not written until year 5. I mean, that's what's so great about drafting these guys in Dynasty. It's like, even if they're bad, if they're top 5 pick, top 10 pick, like they're going to get 2, 3, and then the number 1 pick will get 4 years.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you. And I mean, even like Mitchell Trubisky, I mean, it's back to life, right? But I think that with his pedigree, the story isn't written yet on one Trevor Lawrence. Okay, a couple more questions, Al, then we're going to get you out of there, okay? So we're going to pivot away from fantasy football again because everybody loves a geek. So again, going on Twitter, we were talking about some college stories between you and Kevin. And without getting Kevin canceled or yourself canceled, do you have any fun memories of young Kevin, the Geek Allen, and Alan Seslowsky?
Yeah, so everybody knows the geek from DFS Army. He's the owner proprietor, and the only stories I have will probably get him canceled, but I don't think he would mind. So we'll start with that.
Be gentle, please.
He's the one that introduced me to hard drugs. I
Oh
mean,
God.
some of my best drunken drug stories are with the geek. He was a wild animal in college, so of course I kid, wink, wink, don't kid. But no, he was always the guy in college where I was one of his roommates that was let's get this party started guy. He was the wild man and always fun, always friendly. Everyone loved Kevin in college. He was and women loved Kevin, guys loved him. And he was always like he was a get the party started guy. And the thing about it that the geek that I always admired was he was one of the hardest partiers in college, but the guy barely did any studying and he got all A's. He's so freaking smart. He can memorize. College was a joke to him. He walked through it and I think he's close to a 4.0 grade point average. And the guy barely did any work. Maybe he did. I wasn't looking, but he partied hard and dominated school. That's why he has a successful business.
That's true. Yeah, I get the feeling where like on a Tuesday night, you're going to be in your dorm room, probably sitting there studying. You got all your textbooks out, and then Kev walks in with a 2.6 of like the cheap ass, like $13 bottle of vodka and say, all right, Al, let's go. Let's get up to the campus bar and get out of here. And then the next morning you're struggling, your head hurts, you're struggling to get into class. You show up like Kevin's just sitting there in class, smile on his face, coffee going. He's like, here, Al, I got you coffee.
It's like you were there, Shane. It's like you were there. I'm actually going to see him in a couple of weeks. I'm heading back to New York. So I haven't seen him in years in person. So we're going to get a steak together.
Beautiful. Okay. I got two more questions for you, Al. And these are important ones. Okay.
And by the way, he did introduce me to hard drugs, by the way. He was the first one to put them in front of my face. And I thank him for it because it was a great experience.
We're just not going to talk about what the hard drugs are because
that's why I said
different levels. Yeah,
that's why I said we weren't shooting needles. Don't worry.
There you go. I mean, I hope not. Okay, what is the number one piece of advice that you, Alan Seslowsky, can give to our viewers walking into the 2022 fantasy football season?
Don't screw up your draft. No, I was kidding. Just take the players you want. Keep in mind ADP. Don't get too cute with the ADP game. And this is your team. You take the advice of all the fantasy analysts you trust and then make your own decision. If you want to outsource your decision to someone else, sure, you could do that, but you will be a lot better. You will get better making the decisions yourself, taking all the information. Think about it like this. Like when you vote for a politician, you take in all the information, you filter out what you think is BS, and then you go pull the proverbial lever, right? You decide which one. No one comes in there and says, hey, go vote for this guy. I'm going to pull the lever for this side or that side. It's the same thing with anything in life. You only get better through making mistakes. All the best players in your league are going to make mistakes. Just try to make one less mistake than all of them. The guy Lindy, who won the NFFC baseball 2 years in a row, and I think in 1 year he may have won the NFFC baseball and the football back to back. They asked him, they said, how did you do it? Like, what do you do differently? He goes, I do because I make all the same mistakes everybody else does. He goes, I don't like. It's like Tom Brady when he throws an interception. He doesn't care. He's let's go, next play. If you drop a player that you shouldn't have dropped, someone else picks them up, move on, next play. It happens all the time. If you start someone you shouldn't have, will get better. So make one less mistake than everyone else and don't get caught up in your mistakes.
Yeah, and realize that sometimes this mistake isn't as devastating as you might think. Like when you drop Danny Gray for some third string tight end, listen, it's still just Danny Gray, right? Like we're not talking about Stephon Diggs here. So understand that your mistake probably isn't as big as you might think it was.
Right. Right. Yeah. No.
Okay.
And again, you're going to make those mistakes in another
Yeah.
league. Just to give you an example, years ago, I traded for Juju Smith-Schuster, thinking he was the 1-1 in Dynasty, and I
Mhm.
gave away, which was you would laugh. I gave away what ended up being the draft picks of Saquon Barkley, Joe Mixon. I mean, I gave away for Juju Smith-Schuster, and it was a complete fail. But I thought I was trading for Justin Jefferson, right? More or
Yeah.
less. So it
Yeah.
does happen, and in a dynasty league, it's more devastating. So just be careful. Sometimes the best trades you make are the ones that you don't make.
Oh, dude, there's definitely and all the bad trades I remember. No, I don't remember my good ones. I just remember my bad ones. That's life, man. That's how you remember. Okay. Last question before we get you out of here, Al. Crystal ball, Alan Seslowsky. Who's
But
going
by
to
the
be?
way, hold on before
Yes.
you ask that.
Yeah.
There's a comment in the YouTube that says cocky Allen always thinks he's better. I would. What message am I giving out there? I actually always. That is the opposite. I'm sorry. I never, is that am I coming off as like a know-it-all? I think the opposite. Like my whole brand is built on that I don't know shit.
No, that's just clipboard Jesus trying to ruffle your feathers,
Oh
and
my God.
clearly
I
he's done a
never
good
get,
job of it.
I never get rattled by the comments, but I've spent my whole life like really telling people like I don't know the answers. I'm just asking the questions that I want to know as a fan of fantasy football. So anyway, I just thought I would address that.
I honestly think some of the wisest people, and I think of you like Al, like we're similar age, but I still kind of think of you as like Uncle Says. That's why I joke. Like to me, you're like the wise
Like
uncle that'll come to
like
you for
brothers,
advice.
man.
Yeah, yeah, but it's not just fantasy advice, life advice we
Yeah.
talk about, right? Like you're just a wise person, and
I give Shane sex advice, everything.
oh, it's fantastic. But yeah, man, I mean, listen, it's the wisest people in the world understand that there's more that they don't know than that they know. And what you try to do is you try to surround yourself by people who have different skill sets than you do. And that's with fantasy
There you
football
go.
advice as well. Listen to the DFS Army show. Listen to me. Listen to Kevin, because Kevin's got some completely different takes than what I have, and vice versa, right? And maybe one of us is going to be wrong. The other one's going to be right. Maybe we're both going to be right. Same with Alan. Like, go to the Rotowire show. Listen to Alan. Listen to Jim Coventry. Listen to Jeff Erickson. Listen to the football diehards. Like, listen to all these different source materials, because that's what's going to make you a stronger fantasy football player. And be humble. At the end of the day, be humble. Don't be like Al. Don't be cocky. Just kidding. Just kidding. Okay, Al. Last question before I get you out of here. 2023. Who's going to be on the cover of the Rotowire magazine?
It's so obvious to me. Again, I don't have any say who's on the cover. The question really what you're asking is who's going to be the next young star that's dominating fantasy football. And the 1-1 is Justin Jefferson next year.
There you go. Go get him, ladies and
It's
gentlemen.
so obvious, right? I mean, wide receiver 8 in his rookie year, wide receiver 4 last year, most yards of any receiver in the first 2 years of his career, offense upgraded to a pass friendly. We all like Kirk Cousins. Justin Jefferson, I think that he is going to be this year's Cooper Kupp. And meanwhile, obviously, this year's Cooper Kupp is someone you take in the 4th round, but he's just going to be the guy that dominates fantasy football from always. And I think he's going to be the Antonio Brown wide receiver, the one where you're just like, I'm not taking a running back at 1-1 next year. I'm taking the guy who got, 1,600 yards and 15 touchdowns on 110 catches, something like that,
And he's going to be in that conversation for the next 5 years. That's the best part about these.
We could all be dead in 5 years, Shane. We can all be dead in 5 years. Let's just worry about next year.
All right, let's just worry about next year. All right, Al, thanks for jumping on the show. Of course, you can follow Alan at Alan Seslowsky, AlanSeslowsky, Sky. Seslow Sky.
There you go.
Of course, his content over at rotowire.com. Do you guys still have that rotowire.com/try for 2 free days?
Yeah, if you want to, here you go. Here's the quick plug. I'm a big advocate of getting as many draft cheat sheets or draft kits as you can. And in season, not only should you be buying the DFS Army and supporting them because you love DFS Army, but I think you should try to sample 2 or 3 content sources a year at least. That's what I do. And our in-season content at Rotowire is great, and you can see it for free. There's no obligation. 2 days. 2 days, you can unlock the paywall. You don't have to put in your credit card. You just put in your email, and it unlocks, and then in 2 days, it just shuts down. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to cancel anything. You don't get any annoying, phone conversations. So you go to rotowire.com/try. Paywall unlocks for 2 days with your email.
There you go. And of course, if you're listening to this show, please like, please subscribe, please comment. We love the comments. We will come back and we will comment on your comments. And this is a channel we're trying to grow. Of course, there's the flagship DFS Army, which is primarily focused on DFS sports, but we're trying to grow this fantasy football show. So please tell your friends and keep watching. So thank you so much, Al, for jumping on the program. For Al, I'm Flex Shane, and we are, of course, the DFS Army Fantasy Football Show.